The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings, alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davidson, Lynette's is open for takeaway noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's. Hey, greetings, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit. It is time for another edition of the week that was on Deadline Detroit. And of course, there's a lot of stupid things that are happening out there that we need to get to today. And I have a great panel assembled today to do so. Noticeably absent today, of course, Alan Langle, editor at Deadline Detroit, and Nancy Derringer of Deadline Detroit, both getting well-deserved rest today and traipsing around who knows where. Nancy's somewhere in France, I think. So she's having more fun than we are today. That's for darn sure. Anyway, they are not here, but I've brought in some great people nonetheless. Steve Fishman, of course, noted lawyer here in town, is back with us once again. We always appreciate it, sir.
Looking forward to it.
All right, we have Lansing power couple, Joe DeSano and Susan Demas with us today from the same home. Susan, of course, is the editor at the MichiganAdvance.com, which you should be reading, by the way, if you want to know what's actually happening in Lansing. And her husband, Joe, of course, longtime political operative, a consultant here in the state. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And of course, my friend Dave Forsetto, the owner of the Lexington in the Woodbridge neighborhood in Detroit. Ran into him last night, as a matter of fact, and he said, "Hey, when can I be on the show again?" I said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And sure enough, he is here. And so, Dave, thank you. Welcome back. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a lot of really important stuff to talk about. And I want to start with this one because Susan, because she does have her eye on things happening in Lansing, alerted me to this incredibly, hugely important piece of legislation working its way through the Capitol right now. Now, you may recall we had a number of storms this year. And when we have storms, that means big waves on Lake Michigan in particular, which sees a number of drowning deaths every year. This year is no different. Now, the state every once in a while will take steps to keep people safe by closing beaches for swimming, especially when there are dangerous rip currents in Lake Michigan, which are not a made-up thing. These are real things. People die every year. So sometimes the beaches have to be closed. But this is America, damn it. And I got my freedoms. And so now there is a bill going through Lansing that would prohibit the state from closing beaches on dangerous days because people just want to freaking swim. Okay, fine. This is what the state is supposed to do, try to protect its citizens. But Susan, this is the kind of thing. This is coming out of the whole COVID thing. It's all related, this whole stupid freedoms thing. And I think people are mistaking democracy for anarchy.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of dumb bills. This is definitely the dumbest one in a while. It's from Representative Luke Meerman. And apparently he thinks the Department of Natural Resources is overstepping by trying to warn people not to go into dangerous bodies of water during storms. As we all know, what this is going to really mean is that, local law enforcement, probably the state will be on the hook for emergency rescues, which will, it cost us all a lot more. So it's not really fiscally conservative, but more than that, it's just boneheaded not to try and prevent people from getting hurt.
Yes, boneheaded is the thing. But like I said, this is rooted in something else. And Joe, I think, you've been talking a lot about this too. This isn't a rational bill in any way, shape or form. This is, somehow people are trying to argue that this is, again, a usurpation of our freedom, that somehow, we're getting fewer and fewer rights every day. And this just seems to be an extension of that line of thinking.
Yeah, I often ask people, where are the freedoms that are being infringed? I mean, for the reaction, you would think we actually went and grabbed the guns. And this is the third decade now of just a disastrous state legislature that has completely ridiculous and counterproductive waste of time legislation.
Yeah, well, and again, what is this? What freedom is the state taking away here? Your freedom to die. I don't understand it because, again, if you've ever been in Lake Michigan and seen those rip currents when they're going, like I said, people die in Lake Michigan every year, drowning, just swimming right off the beach in places like Muskegon, which apparently is the beach closure that set this whole thing off. I mean, it's just I don't get it. And the fact that, they had the nerve to actually push this bill speaks volumes about the quality of the people we have in the legislature these days.
I mean, every year we cover tragedies of children who die in these rip currents. It's horrific. But, right now we have a push to get rid of masks in schools so that kids can die of COVID. So, hey, I guess it's consistency.
But it's the kind of thing, though, that, I wanted to talk about today right off the bat, just because people need to pay attention what is happening, what your state legislators are up to, because really, this is not that uncommon to see bills like this. As Susan said, this is one of the dumber ones we've seen in a long time. But every year there are pieces of legislation like this that are pushed through, or at least, get a hearing and waste the time of the legislators from doing the important work, like, coming up with a budget that is actually constitutional, which we can talk about in just a little bit as well. But, I guess it's garbage in, garbage out, right?
Well, it would seem to me
ahead,
this is just an attempt to keep those Trump voters interested in the electoral process, despite the fact that they all think it's rigged and fixed. Those people still need them to show up and vote come election day.
That's quite a contradiction that they're going to have to wrestle with.
Yeah,
it is.
There's that. Also, asking them or telling them that they shouldn't get vaccinated. It would seem that this is. Can you really disenfranchise that many black voters in Detroit to offset the people that'll die in rural Michigan because they refuse to get the vaccine?
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, exactly. The great mystery.
In 2025, Politico is going to write a story called "Where Did 3% of Republican primary voters go?"
Yeah, that's right. Well, they can go to the empty diners in middle America to find out where they aren't. All right. I just wanted to talk a bit about that because legislation is actually top of mind today. We did manage yesterday to avoid a government shutdown, which was nice to see. We've still got some debt ceiling arguments that are going to be going on and wrangling, of course, over the infrastructure bill and the human infrastructure bill, which is going on. But I'm always puzzled, though, why some people are willing to, risk a government shutdown. This has happened, 3 times? I think we've had 3 different government shutdowns probably since the Clinton era. And none of them have gone well for the Republicans. They've always been the ones responsible for actually making it happen. And they always end up getting whacked for doing it. And I'm wondering why they keep flirting with this. It's like having a live wire in your backyard and deciding you want to, put your tongue on it. It's not a good idea, but they keep doing it. And Steve, I want to get your take on this because you've been watching politics for a long time. I'm not sure why this is deemed to be a decent strategy for them.
In all honesty, I'm just a poor, dumb criminal lawyer. I don't really pretend to be a political analyst like the other people you have on the show. But is it any different than all the other crap that they do? I mean, they have no agenda, it seems to me, and I'd like to hear from Joe and Susan more about that, I suppose. But I don't see any agenda other than to stop whatever it is that the Democrats are doing, and maybe in their minds they think if you force them to, quote, raise the debt limit like it's a big deal, that it's going to help them somehow. There's no way for me to understand lack of vaccinations. The things you guys are talking about, I can't have a conversation with somebody about that because it doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that's kind of where we are with all of these things.
But that's just it. We're not dealing with rational actors.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. Yeah, you're right, Joe. They're not.
And combine that with a breakdown in civic responsibility and activities and elections and whatnot. And you get this lowest common denominator, moronic legislation that's just destructive to everything.
Well, Joe, here's a question though. How do you run against that? If you're the Democrats and you're trying to sort of, make the government actually work in some capacity, pass some legislation, get some bills passed, when you've got one side that basically is willing to blow the whole thing up. And voters seem to appreciate that mindset. And it's got to be difficult to find candidates that are able to, to break through that mindset, especially in some of these parts of the state that are really going down the Trump hole.
Yeah. Please go ahead. I'm sorry, we had a little glitch there. I was talking with a West Bloomfield school board member earlier this week, and this person mentioned that they weren't going to probably run for re-election, and I said to her, I hope that doesn't identify her. I said that that's part of the game here. Drive the good people out, and it's an impulse that I feel I've had over the years, just the past 5 years of getting out. So it's incredibly hard to recruit candidates in this environment, and running against it is maybe not as difficult as we think, because the threat is real. They are fascists. They care nothing more about than power. And we're playing kind of on an uneven playing field until we recognize the real threats that are going on.
Yeah. It's very difficult to run against nihilism, which is what we're dealing with on many fronts. You have nihilism where, up until the very end, you had Republicans in Congress who were willing to default on the full faith and credit of the United States, which we saw during the Obama era as well. And complete nihilism about this pandemic. People would rather see us hit 1 million deaths, which we probably will, because, we're 3/4 of the way there, then have sensible health orders that can save the most vulnerable in our country, which is just insanity, because people, feel that somehow taking care of other people is not what humanity is about.
Well, go ahead.
Anyway, I just, it's a challenge because, you have one party that has fully embraced that, the Republican Party, and then you have a Democratic Party that, has a lot of different constituencies. You have moderates and you have progressives and you have different interests across the country. But moreover, you have that division sometimes looks like complete and utter chaos and weakness, which is a huge risk right now, especially at the federal level, but also at the state level with, the governor not issuing a statewide mask mandate for schools. So my best advice, I'm not a political operative anymore, but, I would just say strength is something that voters do respond to, and looking like you don't know how to react to fascism is not going to help you.
Well, we'll get to COVID in just a little bit, because there are some things going on about COVID and, this sort of nihilism mindset that we need to get to a little bit later. But you brought up the federal government, and I do want to talk a bit about what is going on. I mean, the Republicans have basically put themselves on the sidelines for this whole budget debate that is going on right now over the infrastructure bill and, of course, for the human infrastructure bill, which right now is somewhere between $2 and $3 trillion. The Democrats have been fighting amongst themselves, and you talk about looking weak, but yeah, there are a lot of factions here, and there are a lot of different egos to stroke to get this bill through. This has the potential to be some of the most significant legislation passed by either party in decades, many, many decades. And you talk about the idea of, universal pre-K. You talk about free community college. You talk about giving benefits to parents of young children. There are a lot of different things that are in this that will make a huge difference. And the Democrats may pay for this, because people will see that's price tag on it, whether it's $2 trillion, $1 trillion, $3 trillion, whatever it ends up being. They may pay a short-term political price, but how do you turn that around so that people actually say, well, at least they did something. They stuck to their principles and passed something that they believe in. Because the only thing we've seen besides this in the last years before was another tax cut from the Republicans. They haven't done anything that's proactive in terms of improving people's lives. Other than believing in trickle-down economics.
I would disagree. I mean, I do think that the plan that they passed, the American Rescue Plan in March, which did have a lot of temporary measures, like temporary boosts to unemployment and the child tax credit, but still lifted a whole lot of people out of poverty.
Sure.
So I think a lot's been done, but that's what you build off of. And it is important to show that you can deliver for people.
Democrats could fuck up Christmas morning.
Wasn't it Will Rogers that said, I don't belong to an organized political party, I'm a Democrat? I think that's probably what you're saying, right, Joe?
Well, it is apt, but it is frustrating, though, to watch these negotiations as they play out on the cable news channels. At least Joe Manchin
who is obviously one of those people that does not like that $3 trillion figure. At least he named a number the other day. The person that's the real wild card here is Kristen Sinema from Arizona. We don't know what she wants. And it was interesting to me. I was watching Jen Psaki, of course, the White House spokesperson, give her talk yesterday, her briefing yesterday. She basically said as much. She's like, we don't know what she wants. She has not made it clear what it is she would be willing to support. And I mean, it's got to be incredibly difficult to negotiate something if you don't know what the person even wants to begin with. What do they have to do to move her off of that position and either be the person that blocks it or the person that supports it? Who's got thoughts on that one?
No, I can give you an analogy. When you read that stuff, I can give you an analogy to the law, whether it's criminal law or civil law. You can't come to a bargain if the prosecutor doesn't tell you anything that she wants or he wants, and I'm sitting here saying blah 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 blah, blah and you get no response. That's all I can. I mean, I don't know what you do about Kristen Sinema, but that difficulty that would drive you out of your mind as a lawyer. I can tell you that, because it's easy to say I don't like what you're saying, but when I turn it around, okay, so what do you think? What do you want to do to resolve this case? And if the person never says it, then you know where you wind up in a jury trial. Unfortunately, we have no judge here that can step in and make you have a conversation like you can in a courtroom or in a court case. And that seems to me to be a big problem here.
Well, I mean, she's had what? I think they said she's been to the White House like 8 times in the last week or so to talk to Joe Biden about this. And if Jen Psaki's willing to say that they still are unclear as to what it is she's looking for, I don't know. You need that vote. I mean, there's not a single Republican that's going to come around on this. They need that 50th vote desperately. So she's in a position of power. But Susan, it seems like she doesn't know what to do with it.
It's hard for me to get in the head of someone I don't know. But from the outside, after watching her for the last few years, I think she very much enjoys the attention. She got, a lovely piece out of Axios today. I think she enjoys, being on every network with people wondering, what do we have to do to woo her? I think she's pissing off her base voters. I don't know how she gets reelected because Republicans still hate her. So I can only conclude that she's not planning to run for reelection, and she just wants to make a splash, and it's about ego.
That's not conducive to good government.
No.
I think no longer should we assume that that's what she's interested in.
Well, yeah, but what is she interested in? I mean,
I think that's the big question. I can't think of a larger enigma in American politics in my lifetime. I can't give you a plausible theory of what this woman is about.
Well, look, like Joe Manchin. Okay, you understand the situation he's in. He's a Democrat in a state that Trump carried by 30 points or something like that. He's exactly. So I mean, he's definitely got to think about this, but he's also looking at it in a smart way. There's going to be a whole bunch of money coming to the state of West Virginia.
Manchin's a deal maker, and we, that leads into this odd memo that Chuck Schumer and Manchin cooked up. I don't understand that either. And I hate to get alarmist, and anyone who follows me on Twitter knows I feel pretty strongly about the results of January 6th. This is scary. I kind of feel like we're riding the 1930s.
Yeah.
Well, a little bit, but one thing that did come about in the 30s, of course, is Social Security. So, some progress was made. The New Deal. So
I don't think we need Hitler Part 2, though.
No, we certainly do not, especially not in this country. But I look at it. I'm worried that this thing's going to be watered down too much. At the same time, would you, if they pass something? Anything, even if it's a lot less than what the progressives want, and they're flexing their muscle right now, as they should, to get what they want. Is it a victory for Biden if anything passes when it comes to this? Absolutely.
But the goal of the Progressive Caucus should be, and I think it is, to get as much as you possibly can. And that's a power that they have not really exercised effectively. And it's their chance to show that they're grown-ups and they care about governing, as opposed to Twitter progressives that just want to, scream about stuff. because at the end of the day, this is not an intellectual discussion. This is about how much money does the single mom get in Decatur? What do we want for this country and for our future? How can we improve healthcare for people? And I think there's an enormous amount of good. And there's a lot of good to be done in that infrastructure bill, too, that a lot of people don't really care very much about, because fixing roads is not very sexy. But for those of us in Michigan that have to deal with potholes all the time, any help there would be great. And that's the kind of stuff that people can see and feel.
Well, and I'll tell you what, the idea of, dental, vision care and hearing assistance for seniors is not a bad thing, because guess what things go bad as you get old? Your teeth, your vision, and your hearing. Talk about a quality of life issue. This stuff can actually, a lot of people just can't afford to do it. You need new teeth, that's thousands and thousands of dollars. We need to do something about that, because it's a direct impact on your overall health if you have bad teeth. Hearing, vision, these things are not covered right now, and they should be. And I'd like to see that change made. And I think that's something that, if the Democrats could actually figure out how to explain how this is going to benefit people, instead of just talking about $3 trillion, talk about what that money's going to be spent on.
Well,
and you'll get people on board.
So this bill stops after it's the most significant, after this sentence. This is the most significant legislation in 30 to 60 years. Some variation of that sentence is the last analysis. And the first analysis in those cases.
Yeah, the only explanation is that, well, it's a significant piece of legislation. Right. Yeah, we're spending a lot of money, but nobody's talking about how they're going to benefit.
Then you allow the other side, who, as my wife so artfully said, are nihilists. You allow that to turn into a Christmas tree for them to hang, their distortions on.
Right.
Well, Ronna McDaniel, of course, tweeted something yesterday about this and just said, well, it's your money. You're going to be paying for this kind of stuff. And I tweeted back to her, as I sometimes do. And I said, Ronna, you know what? I'm tired of you taking my money and giving it to rich people, which is what you've been doing for a long time. So, I don't mind if my money goes to benefit somebody who needs a hand up, somebody who needs hearing, somebody who needs new teeth, somebody who needs childcare for their kids, somebody who needs pre-K. I don't mind my tax dollars going to that, my money. I do mind it going to people that already have a whole bunch of it. And that's the only thing that the Republicans have done to counter it. They're saying, well, it's too expensive. They didn't whine about the price tag of those tax cuts. And those weren't paid for either.
No.
And it's like, and the Democrats are getting hammered over this number, and they just don't seem to know how to counter this.
Aren't they being paid for in this latest round of debt ceiling?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what we just paid for.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, and they're trying to say that that's Joe Biden's debt. The bill hasn't even passed yet, people. So anyway, I'm tired of the Democrats not figuring out how to counter these arguments. And after 30, 40 years, we can see that the other strategy of trickle down does not work. It has never worked. Yeah. It's no basis in any rational fact here. But people still want to cling to this belief that if you give rich people more money, that somehow they're going to magically create some jobs for you, or it's going to, rain down on your family. It's just not. And so
I don't think that the world's trust fund children need any more, tax-free money.
Won't somebody think about the children?
Do you guys think that it sounds like what you think, and I think it's what I think. The problem is their inability to communicate artfully with anybody. I hate to go back to the presidential campaign, but I watched that Fox News thing with Mayor Pete that Chris Wallace hosted, and it was all Fox News watchers, and they questioned him, I don't know, an hour. And when he got done, he got a standing ovation. It couldn't be because they agreed with all of his policies, but he had an ability to communicate. And that's what it seems to me, particularly in this day and age, where everything seems to be communication, whether it's verbally, Twittering, or whatever. They just don't have an ability to do that. The Democrats don't. Biden's terrible at it. I mean, Chuck Schumer, but looking over his glasses, reading, a speech. That's not the way. If you're a lawyer talking to a jury, you look down and start reading. I tell you what the jurors are going to do: start sleeping. And that's what I think happens here. We need better communicators, it seems to me, but I'm more interested what you guys think, because you guys do this for a living. Do you agree with that? Does that make any sense?
I think you're right. I think you're right. But the interesting thing is the people who are pushing the hardest for some of these changes, people like, AOC. She's one of the people that has been very vocal. Ilhan Omar has been one of the people that has been very vocal about the need for these programs and the need for this type of assistance for people. But they can be easily dismissed by the other side as being those three, the squad, right? And so they will they're dismissed. They are the most passionate advocates for this stuff, and they make a pretty compelling case, but they're not going to get the type of respect from the other side that they probably should for actually arguing facts and need, as opposed to, throwing bombs like you get from the wackos on the other side.
Well,
Just a thought.
The key is how you communicate to voters. You're not going to convince Republicans. You're probably not even going to be able to make your case to most of the political press, because all they want to do is report on, did Biden win? Did Biden lose? They don't even want to tell you what's in the bill, because that takes a lot more work and that's not as much fun. But I would defer to Joe, because I think that Joe is an incredible communicator, and he's very blunt, and sometimes people don't really care for that. But you know what? It works a lot better than a West Wing speech, and a lot of people just don't like that.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. All right, we should switch to COVID here for just a little bit, because you mentioned, Susan, earlier the relief bill that was passed earlier that did a lot of that. There's some very strange things going on when it comes to COVID relief funding right now. Now, obviously, a number of businesses received aid. It allowed a lot of restaurants in particular to stay open. Dave, you opened your place, a week before COVID hit, something like that?
We were trying to,
yeah,
and then it hit, and then we were delayed, and unfortunately weren't able to get aid because we hadn't been open already.
Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing: there is a huge need, right? There's still a number of businesses that are suffering. Alabama wants to take its COVID relief funding from the federal government and use it to build more prisons in the state. Now, granted, I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. Kay Ivey is the governor down there, and she's made a defense of this, saying, well, our prisons are in terrible shape, and there's nothing in the bill that says we can't spend it on prisons. But Alabama, has the highest death rate, if I'm not mistaken, percentage-wise, of COVID in the country. There are a number of businesses and healthcare systems and people that could use this kind of assistance to help pay their medical bills, get the care that they need, avoid dying. And instead, they want to spend the money on a freaking prison, which seems to be at odds with the way almost every other state is starting to think about incarceration right now. Now, does that I thought about Schmuck of the Week for that one, but I don't think that's a big enough award for this level of boneheadedness.
Let me stop you, though, Craig.
Go ahead, Joe.
This same issue, I would not be surprised if it pops up here right here in Michigan, because we're sitting on $10 billion of unused aid at this point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised if a lot of that gets siphoned out to prisons in Republican districts. I mean,
yeah. Hey, it's jobs.
It's jobs, yeah. Exactly.
And the governor's defense is one of the biggest economic winners in the state of Mississippi, probably.
Well, look, I mean, the UP could use jobs. They've got a bunch of prisons up there. That seems to be the only growth industry they have up in that part of the state. And it's too bad, because I love the UP.
Easy now, I'm a Uper.
Hey, look, I'm not dissing the UP. I said when mining went away, prisons became the new industry up there. It's true. And you've got the big one in Newberry. You got the huge one in Marquette. It is a jobs program for the UP.
But the point is, we're laughing now about how ridiculous it is, but I think the reality is we'll probably have to face this in some manner here before too long.
But there are certain competing interests, I would assume, that would, probably do better with that money. And like I said, you're starting to see a de-emphasis of incarceration. Certainly seems to me that there are better uses of that money, especially when we've got significant infrastructure issues in the state.
Clearly, it could fuel a tax cut.
Oh, that's true. We could.
You're barred, actually. The Department of Treasury made sure that language was in there, although Republican attorneys general are suing.
You gotta step on the punchline, don't you?
I'm sorry. me and my media facts.
Yeah, well, and again, I'm sorry, Joe, but I don't recall wives laughing at husbands' jokes very often. So
Oh,
They
I
never-
laugh all the time. He's a joy to live with. I don't know what I would do if he wasn't funny.
Yeah, well, okay. I'm just kidding around, but so you see that, and I'm just looking at what's going on in Alabama and how many things in that state need to be fixed. And this is the first thing that they think of is jails. That's just indicative of a mindset down there that I'm glad I'm not from there. Now, Michigan, of course, we're not far behind them in many of our attitudes. I mean, they don't call us Mississippi for nothing. But we're still not Alabama, and Michigan. Don't take the bait. Don't go down that path because it's a bad path. There's a reason that people sing about Alabama in bad ways. All right. So what else do we want to get to? COVID stuff. Let's keep talking about that because there were a couple of other things that I was looking at here. We had a counterfeit vaccination card ring that got busted here in Southeast Michigan this week. You had a nurse who was actually selling real vaccination cards and another guy that was basically forging them. But I'm thinking to myself, all right, I guess there is a black market for these sorts of things for the anti-vaxxers out there so they can go to restaurants and concerts and all this kind of stuff. Anybody surprised to see this kind of thing popping up?
I can tell you this, as soon as everybody started talking about all of us who do what I do for a living, we were just waiting for when would it start and when would they catch them. And you guys have kind of seen it. It started and they caught a few of them, and there's probably more out there. Look, almost anything that the government does, the rescue money, the PPP, there are con artists out there all ready to take advantage of it. And those who don't believe it, Craig, you get tired of hearing me about talking about the criminal mind. People with a criminal mind, whether it's Donald Trump all the way down, they're going to come up with ways to scam people and to scam the government, and because they're grifters, that's what they are. And
really the only question is how much of this is going on that we're not catching.
I can tell you how much. Plenty. I can tell you plenty. And a lot of people were living pretty high off the hog on that other stuff. Because once the government starts throwing a bunch of money at things or gives you an opportunity to make a bunch of money by giving the anti-vaxxers a way that they can go to a concert by Ted Nugent, that's what goes along with it. And people really need to understand that the criminal mind is a very unique way for those who have it, like Trump. I mean, he's exhibit A of it. They look at the world differently than all the rest of us do. I know, Craig, you're probably sick of hearing me say that because I've said it on the show so many times.
Never.
When people have a difficult time understanding it, a lot of times it's because they don't want to accept the notion that people are born. Denny McClain, right? Great pitcher. He had a criminal mind. He couldn't avoid doing illegal things. That's just how some people are wired. I always say the brain like this is the criminal brain. There's the normal brain. That's what I think.
Well, the jails are full of really smart people who are incredibly lazy.
Lazy, that in a sense, but I got to tell you something, Joe. When you deal with what I deal with, you'd be surprised how much time and effort and energy some of the things that these fraudster things, if they put that much energy into regular work, they'd all be doing fine. They'd be the president of their synagogue or something,
He's laughing because we've had a variation of the conversation ongoing.
But I'm just saying it's the way the criminal mind works, and a lot of people who haven't been around crooks all their life like I have, it's very difficult for people to accept that. And
it was from Macomb County. So.
Yeah, that is true. There's never any crime up there, and certainly no fraud or anything like that going on in Macomb County. Come on now. But it's funny though. I'm coming to mind. Where do you get one of these? Who do you talk to? Is there like a dude on the street corner going opening up his jacket the way he used to with selling pot or something, saying, "Hey, I got vax cards here." Where do you find out where to get a fake vaccination card? This is a learning opportunity for the audience. Dave, you got a little side thing going out of your bar there or something?
On the street, out of their coats, they wouldn't get caught as often, but you can't reach as many people that way. So they're doing it online like everything else is done. And they leave a trail that is easy to find. They have stuff like this group that got hit was having it mailed to their house, right? Like from China to their house. The feds intercepted it and delivered it themselves. Like the world is a lot safer for the criminal when everything is offline. Not that I know anything about that, but that's not the way the world works anymore.
I think that's what Dave just said is 100% accurate. I can't tell you the number of cases or investigations that I get involved in. That's exactly what happens. Coming from China, it's being sent from China. The postal back it off. Always the agents deliver it. The guy always takes it, brings it in, opens it up. They wait till he has a little time to open it up so he can't say, "Oh, I didn't have any idea what that was." Then they go get him. You're absolutely right. Most of it is out there in the open. In terms of how do you find out, the one thing you got to realize is that the streets, especially with social media, things fly around. You know, the streets talk, that's for sure. The guys in the streets, they don't have anything else to do but talk and do illegal things anyway. And then with social media, people who are just spend all their time looking at that stuff, it's easy to find out almost anything, right? You know, I don't have Twitter. I got a flip phone, for God's sake. You know, I don't participate in that stuff. But I'd be fascinated if we had a different show. I'd love to hear what all of you guys think about the effect of social media just on life, particularly amongst the youth. I just think that the whole world is so different. Now, I'm a lot older than you guys.
You know, that's an interesting thing that you bring up, and it's a story that I actually wanted to get to, and I didn't put it in the list of things that I sent you guys yesterday. So remind me to get back to social media in just a second. I got one more COVID-related thing that I want to talk about here. And Susan, this is something you can help out with, because apparently the budget bills that passed here in Michigan have language in there that says any agency that still has mask mandates in place or any sort of mask mandate requirement by today, I think October 1st, is potentially could lose its funding.
Right.
Now, the Whitmer administration says, well, it's unenforceable. We're not going to enforce it.
Yeah.
Why is this in the bill in the first place?
Because Republicans decided to be very clever, and clearly their lawyers were very clever about it, because it has worked in 7 different counties. Now, you can come to the conclusion that probably these counties were lobbying for it on the down low, which is something we don't really want to talk about, but happens all the time. But also it was supposed to inflict pressure on more Democratic counties, like Oakland, like Kent Kent is trending towards, to rescind theirs. Which neither of them have, but will now be heavily litigated. And, you know, the governor should have seen this coming. It's really on her administration now to issue a statewide mandate, but I do not think that's coming.
I know. I don't think it's coming either. But here's the thing. She's got a line of veto. She took a bunch of things. No?
This is not. She can only veto stuff that comes with a dollar amount.
Oh, and this doesn't.
It's boilerplate language. So she issued a statement saying this is unconstitutional for X, Y, and Z. And then these local health departments said, yeah, we could get sued anyway, so screw it.
Well done, Republicans. You know, and here's the thing. Looking at the data, which I learned this morning on MichiganAdvance.com, the numbers are up and transmission is high in every county in the state.
Yep.
Very high, I think, is the number that they used, right?
Yeah.
So
we're at the highest level for all 83 states, and you can
83 counties,
yeah. 83 counties. You can only conclude that if you get rid of the school mask mandates, that we're just going to see an upward trend. Because, you know, it's not just with kids, it's with everybody who works in the school and everybody that anybody comes into contact with.
Oh, man, it's just ridiculous. All right. Okay. Social media. Let's get back to that, because I'd forgotten about this. I saw, you know, that's how much happens in a given week. Facebook had internal data taking a look at the impact of Instagram on the mental health of young people, especially young girls. Their data showed that this is a very unhealthy platform for young girls, and that body image and everything else was significantly impacted by Instagram and Facebook, for that matter. They buried the stuff, and then they said, well, you know, our own studies didn't really show what our studies showed, and tried to downplay it as if they haven't been doing any research into what, you know, impact this stuff has on society as a whole. I don't know what the federal government is going to do about any of this, but are we in a situation where we need to start regulating the social media channels the way that we do broadcast television, broadcast because it's certainly not something that should be left up to the companies themselves, because they've proven themselves unable or unwilling to do anything about it. Who's got thoughts on that?
Well, there's a profit motive to traffic in misinformation, to traffic in dangerous ideas, because you can get an audience for it. The political ads that, run in elections don't have to meet the same criteria that they do if they run in a newspaper or on television.
Jesus.
What?
Thank God.
Well, we're in different categories on this one. We have different jobs, but it goes way beyond politics and misinformation. Although it's tragic the amount of misinformation about the pandemic, and has definitely contributed to an untold amount of the deaths that we've seen. But for children, it's concerning because there are all sorts of pressures on kids, but on social media, things get really amplified. And, when you have a vulnerable 12-year-old girl who starts getting pro-anorexic ads all the time, that's probably not great.
Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
Personally, I think the best way to put a stop to all kinds of different things, and this is not because I'm a lawyer, but it's to allow lawsuits. The whole business with guns, I think of all the things that they've done to turn this place into a gun country, a gun factory, a gun, whatever you want to call it, you can't sue them. They finally have that lawsuit as a result of the Stony Brook, I always mispronounce it. That's the only way you can get the attention of faith. All they care about is their bottom line. And there's plenty of lawyers who do that kind of stuff for a living, they'd be overjoyed to take on some of these companies. And that's the only way, in my view. You got to hit them in the pocketbook. How did Gawker got knocked out of business, right? The Ku Klux Klan, those lawsuits down there. You got to hit them in the pocketbook. And if Facebook was threatened constantly with lawsuits for that 12-year-old girl, and somehow some lawyer would come up and find experts to support the lawsuit, then I think you could maybe change something. The rest of it, to me, is just talk. I don't know what you guys think about it, but I just think you have to have some kind of a weapon.
I think we have not come to terms with the role of the internet and social media in this country. I mean, we're looking at legislation here that the Telecommunications Act of 1996 is what governs this entire structure. But I think the first thing is exactly what Steve said. The second part is you need to break up Facebook. They need to be punitively targeted for this, because this is worse than tobacco in my mind.
Well, I think that's a very apt comparison, because again, what brought down the tobacco companies was the fact that they had the research and they continued to lie about their products, and they tried to bury that research for a long time. We're starting to see evidence that Facebook, Zuckerberg, and of course Instagram are doing the same thing. They tried to bury this stuff, and they've tried to downplay what their own findings showed, that this is not healthy for the development of kids, especially young girls. And
you jumping into, when you're talking about lawsuits, think about Purdue Pharma and OxyContin, the Sackler family. When it finally got to court, now they should have gone to jail, and they gave them a break, in my opinion, that they didn't even have to go to jail. Just like the Obama administration didn't make all the lenders go to jail, but it got their attention and things changed, right? OxyContin now, a lot of pharmacists don't even want to fill the prescriptions anymore. But how did it happen? A lawsuit. Well, a massive lawsuit all around the country. But I just think that's the way to get their attention. And it's the only way to get these people.
Well, I always tell people, if we can break up AT&T in 1984, we can break up Facebook in 2022.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
Well, speaking of lawsuits, this one I was thinking about making it my Schmuck of the week, but I thought this actually fits in with what we're talking about right now. Alex Jones, of course, of InfoWars and the longtime conspiracy theory host of the show, just found legally responsible in 2 lawsuits yesterday for damages from some of the claims that he made about the Sandy Hook shooting back in 2012, when he was basically calling these false flag accounts, leading to some of the families of these deceased children being harassed by his followers, and their houses were being stalked and everything else. So they sued Alex Jones. He tried to argue somehow that this is freedom of speech and he didn't do anything wrong. Well, he lost yesterday in a default judgment, which was interesting because the judge said that he had not participated in discovery in any true fashion. Of course, Alex Jones's attorneys come back and say the trial court's entry of a default in these cases is stunning. They say it takes in no account to the tens of thousands of documents produced by the defendants, the hours spent sitting for depositions, and the various sworn statements filed in these cases. But the judge came back and said this. It said, the court finds that the defendant's failure to comply is greatly aggravated by their consistent pattern of discovery abuse throughout similar cases pending before this court. And this is a judge in Texas, by the way. The court finds that the defendant's discovery conduct in this case is the result of flagrant bad faith and callous disregard for the responsibilities of discovery under the rules. Now, Alex Jones is now liable for damages in these cases, personally liable, which is nice to see because this type of stuff that he was doing to these families is absolutely despicable. But, Steve, I want to ask you about that. I mean, judges take the discovery rules pretty seriously, I'm guessing.
Well, keep in mind, you're asking a criminal lawyer about civil discovery rules, but I know enough from talking with other lawyers, and I've testified as an expert in civil cases. Absolutely. And judges really take seriously their own orders. And if they're ordering you to do X, Y, or Z, and you turn around and do A, B, and C, you're going to have to answer for it, even when it's in Texas. That's the way the court system works, which again reinforces the notion we're talking about. Bring these people to court where they got a judge they have to answer to, and then they have a jury they have to answer to. And Alex Jones, could you imagine that case going to a jury? And here come the parents, and here come with I'm sure photos of these jackasses marching around their house and all that stuff. Find me some jurors that are going to find for Alex Jones. They don't exist.
And here's all you need to know. So if anybody out there is listening to this and you're an Alex Jones fan in some capacity, here's what you have to know. There was a deposition back in 2019 in this case, and it was a sworn deposition. He acknowledged that he knew that the shooting was real. And what he claimed was, quote, a form of psychosis that made him question whether the event was staged back in 2012. So he basically made in his defense that he was suffering from a form of psychosis, which makes him think this way. So if anybody is out there listening to anything that this guy has to say, just look at the legal proceedings in these cases. Remember, Tucker Carlson said no reasonable person should believe anything that's said on his show. That was his defense. Their defense usually tells you whether or not they're full of it. Clearly, Alex Jones is full of it. I was really excited to see this happen, and I hope he goes broke as a result of this.
Damn you, Craig Foley. You just made me agree with Alex Jones for the first time in my life.
That he has a form of psychosis?
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, but, that one made me happy. I was reading that this morning, and I was just like, you know what? It's a sunny morning out there. I'm all of a sudden in a good mood because this jackass is going to have to pay for being a complete and total jackass, and it's about damn time. Anyway, let's see here. It is almost time. I think it is time for Schmuck of the Week. So we've got Schmucks galore. I've got a whole bunch of them. Who wants to go first this week?
I volunteer to go last because I'm on the show often, so I don't want to take somebody else's.
I'll go first just in case this causes a conflict for Steve. I can find another schmuck before the end, but so just let me know if this is one of your clients or you're involved in some way. But my schmuck of the week is former Warren City Council need to be clear, candidate Jerry Bell, who is turning himself in today to Genesee County prosecutor David Layton on charges of sexual assault and extortion of sitting Macomb County Commissioner Michelle Nard. After a 4-month relationship, she alleges that he assaulted her, and that's bad, obviously. But here's the Macomb County twist. They ran against each other a couple years ago. Just the absurdity of this situation. But Jerry's my schmuck of the week. It should be Jim Fouts, but we're going to go with Jerry Bell, who's a key ally of Mayor Fouts.
Well, Jim Fouts is eligible pretty much every day. So
that's why I didn't pick Jim Fouts in case. And just to be clear, the situation in Warren is the big downtown development, and the mayor brought Jerry Bell out earlier this week to speak in support of this town center. So
even while this was going on?
Yeah, everyone knew this was going on. Absolutely, yeah.
Fouts does not care. He thinks he's untouchable. And I mean, the dude's been mayor a long time. Warren has always had a wonderful history with mayors. Some bigger than others. I don't know. If we'll talk about that another time. All right, who wants to go next with their schmuck? Dave, what do you got?
All right. Well, you stole my Alex Jones one, but I was prepared with another. Cleat Keller, ex of the U.S. men's swimming team, was convicted or turned in a guilty plea this week for taking part in the insurrection on January 6th. Won gold medals in 2004 and 2008, I believe it was. And then all 6'6" of them in his U.S. swimming jacket was there on January 6th, walking through the rotunda in full view of everyone. I think they said it looks like he'll get 21 to 27 months would be the sentencing guidelines. It could have been as many as 10 years, but it won't go that high. It's, I think, a lesson for all of us that when we just turn these athletes into gods and consider them these great patriots because they win gold medals for us, they're really good at a sport.
Out of politics.
Yeah. Well, is that possible in America at this time? Like, I don't know that that's possible, but you could be brighter about it, I guess.
Absolutely. All right. You know what? I'll go next, and then we'll have Susan, and then Steve. Because mine's okay. I got a few. J.D. Vance. The wonderful J.D. Vance, author and now candidate for Senate in Ohio, came out the other day on Tucker Carlson's show and claimed that the Ford Foundation is a cancer on American society. And he also says that the government should be able to take away their tax exempt status and seize their assets. So he's saying that they have to do this because, they're close to being communists. And I thought, well, hey, if the government is going to seize the assets of a private foundation, doesn't that seem kind of fascist? So J.D. Vance coming out full.
Well, like all fascists, they start communists.
Well, that's exactly right. First they came for the communists, then they came for the Ford Foundation. It's just silliness. The Ford Foundation obviously has taken a bit of a leftward turn in the last couple of decades, and they are very much for social justice causes and things like that. I don't think they've done anything that would warrant the government seizing their assets and removing their tax exempt status, because if you're going to go down that road, there's a whole bunch of churches out there that probably need to have the same thing done. So if you're going to go that way, then be honest and be across the board. That if anybody's advocating for political things, you should be able to take their assets.
Clear difference between taxing an entity and destroying an entity.
Well, and especially for people who hate cancel culture, right?
Yeah.
I mean, hypocrisy. My name is J.D. Vance. So anyway, he's not.
I'm sorry. This is the same guy who thinks that parents should have votes for their children because the childless left doesn't have any interest in the future of this country. But because the right, in his view, have more children, they should get those votes until they turn 18.
And last I checked, the childless left was trying to funnel a whole bunch of money to those right-wing child-bearing people. So the childless left seems to care a little bit more, I think, than J.D. Vance about that sort of thing.
Do they?
I think so. The godless, childless left, of course. Just ask the Ford Foundation. Susan, who you got?
I will say, Joe and I will take 2 extra votes for our kids. Actually, no, one of them is an adult, so I guess we don't get that. But yeah, that's
well.
Fine.
Are they still on your insurance? Because if they are, there you go.
Still enjoying the fruits of our labor.
All right. So what do you got for your schmuck?
My schmuck, I gotta go obvious, and sorry for lack of creativity, but I'm going with Mitch McConnell. I mean, this is a guy who has been around forever. He understands the financial stakes. He understands the process. He was absolutely fine raising the debt ceiling under Trump. Then the minute a Democrat is president, then all of a sudden it's back to debt is bad. Got to play these games. He knows what he's doing. You might have people who are like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, who are out of their minds. But Mitch McConnell knows, and he's still willing to screw with our country's credit and with good public policy because he can.
Well,
and he'll do it again at any point. Do you think that Kentucky isn't going to get any of this infrastructure money? Of course. Kentucky can't run itself. It runs on federal money. But he's not going to supply any votes for that.
No, of course not. Of course not. Well, it's interesting you brought up Marjorie Taylor Greene because she was on my list as well, because she had the nerve the other day to say, I will stay silent no longer. And I was like, when have you been silent? I don't recall your mouth being closed one time. So yes, she's like, we will be silenced no more. Like you haven't been silent about anything. And quit your whining. This victim mentality coming from people like Marjorie Taylor Greene is just stunningly obtuse. Steve Fishman, what do you got?
I'm going to the highest court in the land, and my schmuck of the week is Justice Samuel Alito, who went to the University of Notre Dame Law School, standing in a classroom, by the way. I happen to see a picture on the internet somewhere, Washington Post, I think, and whined. This is a justice of the Supreme Court that he and his fellow justices who are allowing that statute in Texas to stand, depriving females of the right to seek an abortion, they are being unfairly criticized, and these newspaper writers are criticizing. And basically, he was talking about Elena Kagan, who wrote the dissent in that case. He doesn't like the term shadow docket, but basically he stood in front of a bunch of law students, and he picked Notre Dame for a reason, obviously. It's a Catholic law school, and you probably got more conservative thinking people.
Also, Amy Coney Barrett School.
He certainly didn't come to the University of Michigan Law School, where my daughter is, and give that speech, because I don't think he'd have got through 2 sentences of it before they'd have hooted him off campus. But to me, this new thing, it's kind of what you guys were saying. They now declare themselves to be victims. Samuel Alito is a victim. They've got 6 out of 9, 5 when Roberts decides to do the right thing. And they're doing whatever they want at the United States Supreme Court. But they don't want anybody to criticize them. They don't want anybody to say they might be a tad political. They don't want anybody to have anything negative to say about them. We should all think of them as if it were the court back in 1815, before you had the kind of politics that influenced the selections to this court. So to me, I was going to go with Mike Pence and his trip to, I think it was Hungary, with the right-wing crazy people. But once I read that today, Justice Alito, you are the schmuck of the week.
I think that is a very, very fine addition to the schmuck mantle, and a really good one. And I appreciate you bringing that to the table. I was going to put Stephanie Grisham up there just because, you know what? You should have told us all the stuff while it was actually going on. There's some really, really creepy stuff in her book. I mean,
yeah, but there's always money to be made.
I know, but I'm telling you, there is some creepy stuff in that book. And here's my favorite part. My favorite part about that book is that Donald Trump actually tried to call Stormy Daniels to get her to retract the statement about the shape of his penis. He was worried about that. And he tried to call.
What? Let's give one of our leading porn stars credit for standing up to full presidential power. Telling a United States president no, that's tough for anyone.
I'll tell you what, though, that book looks like it's going to be salacious and silly. Not quite as probably deep and meaningful as the book Peril, which is really scary stuff that Bob Woodward and Bob Costa brought up. But anyway, some fun reading for you as the weather gets cooler, everybody. All right, we're going to have to wrap it up for today. I do appreciate everybody being here today. Dave Frisetto, thank you very much. And by the way, everybody, if you happen to be in the Woodbridge neighborhood in Detroit, stop over. It's right on Trumbull, just north of Warren there, between Warren and I-94, close to a bunch of other cool joints that have opened up in that neighborhood. The Lexington, that's what it is. What time do you open every day?
Right now we're 4 p.m. until 2 a.m. on Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and shortly we'll be adding Wednesday to that. And, God willing, and the creek doesn't rise, we'll get Monday and Tuesday open soon too.
There you go. All right. Well, we appreciate you being here. Absolutely. Good to see you. Joe DeSano and Susan Demas, thank you very much. The echo was not really a big deal, even though you guys are about 12 feet away from each other. So I appreciate it. Thanks for being here once again. And a quick reminder, of course, the Michigan Advance is a worthwhile read every day. There is really important information that's there. We don't pay enough attention to what's happening in our state legislature. And the Michigan Advance does a nice job talking about it. And it's also something you can read for free. You know, that's kind of an important deal because a lot of the good Lansing coverage is behind a paywall that's not cheap paywalls either. You know, this isn't like getting the free press for $1 a month or something like that. Some of these good Lansing publications cost a whole lot of money.
The shitty ones do too.
That's a good point. No, I'm not going to name any names there, but yes, I would agree with Joe on that one. So thanks for being here, both of you. I appreciate it. Steve Fishman, you know, we'll talk soon. I've got to ask you a couple of questions about something we did not get to on the show today, and whether or not you tell me anything is going to be up to you. But we will talk soon. I always
more stuff about Michigan basketball. That's what you usually close with.
Yeah, well,
Michigan basketball.
Well, I don't have much to say about basketball yet because we got a few more weeks until it starts. But it's coming up pretty darn soon, and the team looks like it might be pretty darn strong this year as well. What do you think?
Good. We're going to be good. We're going to be really good.
We are going to be good this year, and that's a nice thing to see. All right, thanks to Michael Lucido for engineering the broadcast, as he does each and every Friday. We always appreciate that. By the way, check out his visit to Eminem's new Mom's Spaghetti place. And I didn't know this. I'm not a huge Eminem fan, but apparently Mom's Spaghetti in that song is like a reference to vomit. So it seems kind of odd that he would name it that, but he has a video where he is eating what he says is somewhat bland, but passable spaghetti. So Eminem's got a new restaurant downtown, apparently. All right. And with that, we wrap it up for the day. Thanks to Lynette's Shrimp House. Much better food, by the way. They sponsor this program. I certainly appreciate their help. And also thanks to everybody over at Deadline Detroit, deadlinedetroit.com. Great coverage of all the news here in Metro Detroit and nationally sometimes, depending on what it is we're covering. But it's all there for you. And think about a membership there. Again, it's deadlinedetroit.com/membership. $3 a month is what we're looking for. And you could win some cool prizes and stuff like that. And also just, you know, keep up to date on all the great news. Thanks, everybody. Happy Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. And since Alan is not here, I guess I'll have to say it. Drive home safely.
The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davidson, Lynette's is open for takeaway noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's.